Hello everybody, I'm Roadblock. This is a Raid Shadow Legends video. We have a lot to talk about today, but the first thing I want to do is kind of get out of the way that I will be streaming tonight. That's Friday night, 10 p.m. Eastern Time. I will be streaming and opening up all of my ancient shards on my account live for you guys to enjoy. I'm going to have to make some room before we get started, but I do recommend if you are able to come hang out. We are looking for a legendary, but we also are looking for two specific epics to get Lady Mikage. So it could be a very big day for me. Who knows? I highly recommend coming and hanging out. I also gift memberships for the account out whenever I'm doing this. So there is an opportunity that you could win a membership and get access to special privileges within the community. So I would recommend coming and hanging out for that. It should be a lot of fun. We've got a fusion coming up, and I'm going to be releasing two videos, one of them related to the fusion. I haven't recorded them yet, but I plan on recording them based on some comments and stuff that I've read either in the Discord or in the comments section, or even just live when I'm streaming. One of them is going to be about gearing champions, right? So I re-geared my Sun Wukong live. A lot of people messaged me directly and said, hey, or not messaged directly, but messaged in the Discord and said, I learned a lot from that. Can you elaborate on building other champions that aren't just a nuker? Like, how do you build this champion? How do you build that champion? I'd like to make a video about that. It's been requested. I love working off of requests, so I'm going to make a video about that. The other thing that I'm going to make a video about is how to prepare for a fusion. Whether or not you think this upcoming fusion is worth it, that remains to be seen, and we're going to discuss that in this very video. But I will make another video talking about the preparation steps that I take going into a fusion and what I look for in my account to say that I'm ready, okay? So let's move right along into the important part of the video, if you will, which is the fusion. So I'm going to go over each ability, give a brief explanation of what the ability is doing, and then I'm going to review the ability and the kit as a whole at the end. So to start, we have an A1 attack. The A1 is a single target attack with a 50, 60, 70% chance when booked of placing the big version of decreased defense for 2 turns. If there are any of the beasts on the team, they will team up with the ally to attack that target. Now, what do I mean by beasts on the team? There are a series of champions in the game that are classified as beasts. I think we had one. No, not one in here. So we have, I know there's an orc one, orc 2 rather. You've got Terror Beast from the orcs and Gormask from the orcs. Is there any in Ogryn? No. Okay. And then there's Undead Stitched Beast right here. And the rest are Demon Spawn, I believe. So you have Hound Spawn, Hell Fang, and Fell Hound. There's also Pit Cur, which they left out, which I thought was funny. It would have been interesting if they included them. So those will team up on an A1 whenever Houndmaster uses his A1. Okay. The A2 removes all debuffs from this champion, just this champion, and heals this champion by 50% of their max HP. Then places a shield buff on this champion for 2 turns. The value of the shield is equal to any surplus heal. So if he's at 100% HP and uses this ability, then he will get a shield for 50% of his HP. That is a big shield. Don't underestimate the value of that shield. You're talking half of an HP bar of shielding on an HP champion. Could be pretty decent. The shield buff cannot be removed, stolen, or transferred if there is a beast on the team. Finally, places a taunt buff and a reflect damage on this champion for 2 turns. These buffs also cannot be removed or stolen if there's a beast on the team. For the A3, we have fills the turn meter of all allies by 25%, Also has an 80% chance of placing a block buff's debuff on enemies for 2 turns. This debuff cannot be resisted if one of the beasts is on the team. And then we have a passive. So the passive is, when attacked, places a hex debuff on the attacker for 1 turn. Ally attacks on targets under a hex debuff placed by this champion deal 20% more damage. When this champion is attacked, all ally beasts will counterattack. Increases ally speed. The aura increases ally speed in all battles by 19%. Okay, let's talk about each ability one by one now. The A1, I'm not a big fan of. It's a single target hitter that decreases defense. Sure, great, whatever. And with an ally attack, but only for Terror Beasts on the team. Sorry, not Terror Beasts, but beasts on the team, right? Right now, I'm going to talk about that at the end, but right now, as it stands, I don't know that there's a lot of synergy with these beasts. There could potentially be some synergy with Fellhound. I like that. So Fellhound has an AoE A1, and it does bring the baby version of decreased speed. There is a blessing that you can get to increase that. If we look at the blessings, the new Harmony blessings, there's Nature's Bounty. That can take the small version of a debuff and increase it to the big version of the debuff. So the small version of decreased speed can be increased to the big version of decreased speed. Now you really need 6-star blessing to make that more consistent, but because it's on an A1 and it's on an A1 that has a lot of ally attack mechanics around this boss, there's a chance to bring the big version of decreased speed. And then again, it's an AoE hit, so you could put, like, I guess you don't need Hex or Cursed set. That's a set that places the Hex debuff. He brings the Hex debuff himself, so maybe you don't need that, but it is something that you could consider, or a Provoke set could work too. It is an interesting mechanic in that sense. I don't know that A1 is very good. I mean, you have Rathalos who does the same thing, but it cannot be resisted. Here, you need accuracy for that decreased defense to land. And then there's other stuff in the kit that if you bring an extra beast, you don't need accuracy for that to land. So that is one of my most frustrating things in this game about certain champions is you're going to have there are champions in this game that can place irresistible debuffs, but then place other debuffs in their kit that you're going to need accuracy to place. So the irresistibility doesn't matter other than the the really small chance that every enemy in this game has a percentage chance to just outright resist something, regardless of the resistance they have and regardless of the accuracy you have. It's a very low chance, but it can happen, and it does happen. You'll experience mostly when you're doing Hydra and you have enough accuracy and they still resisted it, and you're like, what the hell, man? That guy should have been provoked. It happens. It'll screw up a run. It's a nightmare. But yeah, I'm not a fan of the A1. We'll talk more about that. We'll talk more about the whole beast mechanic later. The A2 is a self-cleanse. Not a big fan of only cleansing yourself. And a heal and a self-shield. It's a very selfish ability. The fact that it cannot be removed, stolen, or transferred, though, is very intriguing, especially when you consider for the same thing for the taunt and the reflect damage. So taunt is very valuable in Hydra. It can prevent your champions from being eaten. Furthermore, it can control where the Head of Mischief hits. So you could build this champion in very high resistance, and there's a head that will target and steal all the buffs off of a champion. Well, these buffs would all be protected if there's a beast on the team. Furthermore, you're also can still build them in high resist to protect any other buffs that they have on them. And I think you can resist the turn meter reduction mechanic the turn meter steal mechanic that head does too. Now, I've never built a Mischief head. It's something I want to do. This is a great choice for not only a Mischief head, but also a head that can taunt and prevent the potential eating of a champion, which is a problem in Hydra. Hydra will eat one of your champions, and after a given number of turns, if you don't do enough damage to that head will consume that champion, and you cannot revive them. They are gone from the fight. That's usually how most runs end. So there are mechanics in here that can play around some of Hydra's mechanics. If the head that goes to attack is under taunt, or goes to eat somebody and is under taunt, and they go to eat somebody that's not this guy, I think. Maybe it's just every time, but I know at the very least, if they go to get somebody that's not him, the mechanic kind of bugs out almost, but it's actually a game design feature. So then they won't eat anybody. They just skip that eating portion of it and they move on. So it turned into a mechanic for doing Hydra. And they left it in, and it works. It's a great way to mitigate that whole part of a fight. So now we have another champion that can do that while also being a Mischief tank, and then bringing another ability here on the A3. Fills the turn meter of all allies by 25%. First of all, I like that. I really like that. So 25% turn meter fill. Arbiter does 30, so really not a big difference between Arbiter and the Bloodhowl. But Bloodhowl brings something else that is crucial to Hydra. Also has a 100% chance when booked of placing block debuffs on all enemies. This is not predicated on a hit, important there. The debuff cannot be resisted if there are any beasts on the team. So the reason placing a block debuffs is so important is because you can place that block debuffs even when the poison cloud is out. Now, if you haven't done Hydra, there's a Hydra head that will put poison cloud on all 4 heads, which causes all hits to be a weak hit. In this game, if you weak hit somebody, you don't place any debuffs that are related to that hit. So like this attack that could potentially put decreased defense on, that won't land because it'll be a weak hit if they're under poison cloud. This, because it's only placing ability, there's no attack associated with it, goes through poison cloud. So even if poison cloud happens to go off, it happens, we're not perfect, then this is a great way to still place your block buffs and prevent any additional buffs from being applied to the team. So I do like that one quite a bit. And the fact that it cannot be resisted if there is a beast out is also somewhat viable. If there's a good enough beast. And again, we'll talk about that at the end. Then we have the Hex mechanic. When attacked, places a Hex debuff on the attacker for 1 turn. Ally attacks on targets under a Hex debuff placed by this champion deal 20% more damage. When this champion is attacked, all ally beasts will attack. Now, there's a couple things about this that I don't actually like. It's only a 1-turn Hex, which it's a little low, in my opinion, for a Hex. Now, there are masteries that could perhaps make this a 2-turn Hex. I don't know how he would work in a cursed set, but he has no AoE hits, so I don't recommend him in a cursed set. You do get a little Hex out of here. The downside, furthermore, is that ally attacks on targets under a Hex placed by this champion deal 20% more damage. If this is your only reliable source of Hex, I don't know that that is good enough. Yes, he will have taunt. So yes, he should theoretically be the target of each head, thus applying the Hex every time. I don't know. Maybe it works out better than it does in my head, with him being the target every time. But that, to me, also, by the way, this one does not have the cannot be resisted mechanic on it. So you would need accuracy to land this Hex. Depending on beasts, again, I don't know how great this ability is, but because you would need to have accuracy, and I wouldn't want to build him high accuracy. I would want to build him high resistance if I could, right? And then we have an aura, increase ally speed in all battles by 19%. Okay, if we take the beasts out of the kit, let's assume we're just going to use him by himself. You have a decreased defense, single target on the A1. Rathalos does that. A lot of us have him because he was free. I'm not impressed. A self-cleanse, a self-shield, taunt, and reflect damage has some viability. If you take the beast out of it, those buffs can be stolen. The block buffs debuff. This is kind of interesting, truly. My comparison is always to my favorite block buff champion, which is Ugo. So first, let me pull up Ugo here. So for Ugo, this is based on a hit, and it places decreased defense and block buffs on the same ability. My favorite block buff champion. Another great block buff champion is Sun Wukong, who removes all buffs and then puts a block buffs for 2 turns. By the way, why is block buff so important? You heard me mention that poison cloud, right? Where you can't, everything's a weak hit. If you can block that buff from landing. So if you place block buffs and that head goes to place the poison cloud, it won't land. And that allows you to mitigate that particular mechanic, right? So that's how you kind of fight that mechanic. So you want to bring up block buffs for Hydra. There's a lot of benefit there. In this particular case, he does a block buffs. That's 100% chance. And it is places, so there's no weak hit. Affinity doesn't matter with this ability. It will land on every single target that he attacks. The only thing to worry about would be the resistance of the target that you're trying to hit. Then we fill the turn meter of all allies by 25%. So I had to ask myself this question. Would I prefer Ugo, who brings decreased defense, or would I prefer more turn meter that cycles more turns from my team? I'm leaning, truthfully, in the direction of that turn meter fill. The reason being that turn meter filling is a big part of winning Hydra. The more turns you get to take before they do is better. And one of the more common strategies that is kind of presenting itself now in this game is ignoring a lot of the mechanics on Hydra and just killing them before they get to do their mechanics. That's kind of a subset of the Trunda team. Trunda has her reasons that she does massive amount of damage, but what makes it so, I mean, it's powerful in itself. The multipliers are insane. But because you can just kill the heads before they do anything, and do these mechanics that make them get weak hit, or steal buffs, or steal turn meter, or blow up your team, all these things that they do, cleanses, right? If you can just ignore those mechanics, it is pretty interesting. Generating a lot of turn meter is valuable. One of the ways that I generate turn meter, or used to generate turn meter, was with a Lady Kimmy. Well, this guy can do that turn meter filling. It's 25% while also bringing more to the table. So in my current Hydra teams on the free to play, for example, I bring an Arbiter. She gives me turn meter fill and increase attack. I want both of those. That's all that she really brings for me on Hydra. Maybe you could argue a little bit of healing. This guy brings turn meter fill, but also block buffs. That's two things I want. I want turn meter fill and I want block buffs. Is it better than Ugo? That's really difficult to say because Ugo does bring that decreased defense. So if I do bring Packmaster instead of Ugo in one of my teams, then I have to figure out how I'm going to bring decreased defense to make up for that. So there's always give and take when you're trying to figure out your teams. I don't know exactly how I feel about this. And this is, again, we're not considering that I bring a beast, which perhaps there's a beast that brings decreased attack or decreased defense rather, right? On an AoE hit, that would solve some problems. Maybe, and we'll talk about beasts in the future. I don't have a snippet of it, but I'll tell you guys what it said. Okay, so then when attacked, places a hex debuff on the attacker for 1 turn. Ally attacks on targets under hex debuff deal 20% more damage. I don't know how I feel about this hex. I've already expressed that. I prefer the idea of placing the hex before enemies get turns, that it's just easier for me to manage. There's also champions that extend debuffs. So if this was compared with Lady Mikage, for example, a couple of turns, you get hit, that hex debuff is out there. Lady Mikage just extends that and, potentially gets you more turns. There's other champions that can extend buffs as well. So there's viability there. But not a huge fan of the fact that I would need accuracy here, where I don't need accuracy here. Yeah. So, I don't know. But I do like the aura as well. I've talked about this before. One of the common strategies with Hydra is to have a champion in the front in your lead that you generate turn meter to via Shamael. So when a fear goes out, and there's a head that places fears on everybody, when fear goes out, he gives turn meter fill the team leader's turn meter by 15%. So if 4 fears go out, then you get 60% turn meter fill. And that head puts out fear every time it gets targeted. So you can manipulate that to generate fear, to generate turn meter for your leader. And then if your leader gives turn meter to the team, you're taking their own tools and using it against them. And you're just generating turn meter for your whole team. Already build them faster and relentless, and they're then cycling through a lot of their abilities as well. It can really kind of pay off in the long run. So I see a lot of viability with this champion, but it feels kind of like a budget version of a lot of stuff. So I'm not really sure if without the beast how viable it is, but there are interesting things about the kit. I'll say that. Now let's talk about the beast portion. Obviously, all of these abilities get better with a beast, but none of these beasts are really meta. We talked about Fellhound, or maybe I didn't talk about Fellhound. I recorded a version of this video earlier that I didn't like, and I re-recorded it, and this is the re-recording. So I don't know if I mentioned this explicitly yet, but Fellhound does bring decreased speed on the A1. It's the small version. It can become the bigger version with the blessing. I think, yeah, so it did cover this. And an AoE hit. There is some viability if paired with Fellhound. It's my understanding that Hound Spawn combined with Hellfang can do a lot of damage, but you have to be able to place a freeze, which you can't do in Hydra, which is where I see this guy's viability the most. I'm just looking. There is a weaken here, but I would probably have weaken from other better sources, I would say. And again, this is a single target decreased defense. So I'm not sure that the current hounds make a difference, but there was a message in the listing for this champion that came out. Let's see if I can find it here on Discord. I might not be able to find it in a timely manner. There we go. I did. So this is the added snippet. By the way, if you're not impressed with his current roster of loyal hounds, just wait. Packmaster Shayak is always on the lookout for new members to add to his pack, and who knows what beast will join his side next. Meaning, there's probably another beast coming sometime soon that might make him stronger. So, we've talked about everything about this fusion. Let's talk about if you should get him or not. There's a couple things. First, I was wrong. I said the next fusion is going to be really good. It wasn't good. I hoped it would be a void fusion. It wasn't a void fusion. Those were all guesses. That was all speculation. I was hopeful, but I had no way of knowing, obviously. But I had to call myself out, right? I guessed wrong. Now let's talk about the power level of this guy and if he's worth getting. Well, no, before I actually get into that, I want to talk about fusions in general. As far as I understand it, there are three versions of fusions. You have a traditional fusion where you collect rares. Those rares become epics. Those epics get fused into a legendary. Now, this is a permanent one. This is Razin. If you've been playing the game, you know you can fuse him at any time. Once he's fused, he disappears from here. If you look on my main account, you'll see like all those fusions are gone versus what I have on the free-to-play, right? That's a traditional fusion. The hybrid fusion is where you get fragments. We just did this one, where you get fragments for an epic. You collect enough fragments for 4 epics, and those 4 epics become the legendary. And then there is the fragment summon. So the fragment summon fusions are where you collect enough fragments to outright get the champion, right? Once you get 100 fragments, you get the champion. This will be a fragment summon. Now, I view fragment summons as being slightly easier because you don't have to spend the time leveling up and ascending all of the champions. What does that mean? So in the fusion, when you level up, like you'll notice that this is a rare, but it's leveled up to 4 stars, not 3 stars, and it's fully ascended to 4 stars. So that's extra work that you have to do with a fragment. There's a tournament that offers a fragment. You just farm that tournament until you get enough points for the fragment and then move on to the next thing. You don't have to get a rare from that tournament and then go back, level it up, and ascend it. You just get the pieces. You just have to get 100 fragments. So I view fragment summons as being easier for that reason. There's another benefit to fragment summons that can be slept on sometimes. If we look at my main account, you'll see here I've got a legendary waiting to be summoned. Same actually on my free-to-play. I have a fusion or a fragment summon that's ready to be summoned. Why am I saving them? These are worth points in events. So, for example, we are in the middle of a champion chase tournament. if I was to summon that champion during this champion chase, I would get points for that champion. I would get 500 points for that champion in this event. Secondly, they're also worth points in a clan v clan tournament. I want to say 30,000 points if it's a new legendary to your account, like the first time you pulled it. So there's value there if you want to generate a high score for clan v clan for whatever reason. Everyone has their own reasons with clan v clan. So I like going for fragment fusions, fragment summons. I like going for them on my main account every time because they're much easier to do, less of a time sink, and then I can save that champion. And when the next clan v clan comes up, because I am my clan leader, I like to set a good example. I usually summon those champions as part of that event to give myself a higher score. You know, if I get this guy and then I have Gomlock in the next personal rewards clan v clan, that's 60,000 points that I'm ready to summon like that. So pretty good, right? Pretty good to have that in reserve. On my free-to-play account, there's a different perspective. Let's say that I don't view him as worth getting, but the next fusion, and I'm not going to speculate this time, but let's say, for example, it was a good fusion for the next fusion, then I have another champion that I can summon and get myself 1,000 points, right? I've got guaranteed 1,000 points. I've got Yannicka, and then I would have this guy waiting in the wings to pull during that champion chase tournament and ensure a higher chance for me to get the fragments or the rare or whatever I need from that event to complete the other fusion. So right out the gate, when you talk about the type of fusion that it is, it's a pretty good fusion type, my favorite type, and I will go for it on my main account. But is this worth it on my free-to-play account? That remains to be seen on how difficult the path is to get this guy. Furthermore, we don't know what kind of hound they're going to include in the future. That's a bit tricky. That unknown, that fear of missing out. Like, something that happened to me, and I'm burned by it, was I went for White Queen Ancora on this account. I love White Queen Ancora, but when Narcissus came out, I could have spent a reasonable, a small amount of money in raid terms. Like, I could have spent probably, I don't know, maybe like 60, 70 bucks to get enough shards to get Narcissus, and I didn't do it. And I regret that. I really do, because Narcissus and Ancora turned out to be the new meta for PvP. Maybe that changes my position in PvP, my view on PvP. I want to make a PvP video talking about tag team eventually. But I know we're a little long on time here, so I'm going to try and make my next kind of mentions a little bit shorter here. But will I go for him on the free-to-play is entirely about how easy or difficult the fusion is. Now, I currently have good resources, and we'll talk about that in the upcoming video, but I have 12 Sacreds. Those are very good for fusions. That's going to help me pass a summon rush. A little less helpful in a champion chase, but I think Sacreds will be the next 2x. So theoretically, if I only spend 6 Sacreds, then I would have 6 or more, depending on how nice Clan Boss is, to use for the champion chase portion of it as well. So I don't know. It's an iffy kind of feeling. If the Dungeon Divers is way too hard or other parts are way too hard, then maybe I skip. But I like going for fragment ones because they have viability down the line. You could even make the argument, I don't agree with this argument, but even if you think that he's not that good, and you just take those fragments and turn them into mod fragments, or other rewards from a mod chest, then there is that possibility as well. You could possibly get further into your mod progression, or you could get further into, or just get the rewards from the chest, which are pretty decent, right? You've got legendary books, you've got feasts, you've got chickens, brews. I mean, there's some good stuff in there. So I don't recommend that, but it's an option that you have if you really think he's a trash at the end of the event, and they'd say, "Oh, here's the beast that we released, and it's terrible." It's like, okay, cool, we're moving on, right? Let's just get rid of him. I wouldn't do that, but it is an option that you have. So those are my thoughts. I'm gonna keep my outro kind of brief since the video was kind of long. So if you like my content, please consider liking and subscribing. Best way to support my channel. Thank you guys for watching. One last reminder, tonight, that's Friday, 10 p.m. Eastern Time, I will be live streaming, pulling all of my ancient shards. So I recommend coming and hanging out for that. If you can, I'll see you there. If not, I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care, guys.